In this series on the history of workflow, we're using two main models to contextualize workflow as an art. The first model was the 3 ages of work, and that provided us with a high-level overview of the ever-developing relationship between humans, their tools, and their work. In this video, we explored the second main model, the dual revolutions. If we take the time here to study how the unique factors of the industrial age collectively took on new life, we'll not only be able to accurately diagnose our current age, but we'll be able to put together a prognosis. It's never been harder to work, but it's possible to regain our focus and creative energies. Studying this twofold pattern helps show us the way. From last week's high-level overview of the 3 ages of work, we gathered a handful of worthwhile nuggets to contemplate. Human nature as a stable foundation on which to build workflow behaviors. The importance of reintegrating our senses into our thinking. The relationship between living well and acting well. And the role of virtues in maintaining this connection. But now, if we zoom in, if we get more particular, we're going to uncover a whole nother layer of insight. When doing the research for this series, one particular aspect excited me the most, and that was this parallel pattern of dual revolutions within both the industrial and the information ages. For both ages, there seem to be 2 distinct phases. Each age begins when significant changes occur in those 5 factors we discussed earlier. The primary tool moves from being the hand to being the machine. The location moves from being the field to being the factory, etc. But there comes a time in which these factors, swirling together, reach a sort of boiling point in the age without changing its overall essence, dramatically leaps in intensity. In phase 1 of each age, we have disruption, invention, tension, and the generation of a new kind of momentum. It's like a wave, begins to form, but it's not fully recognized. It's only in phase 2 that the wave has gained its full strength. It's grown in height and power. It's surging forward. And at this point, humans have a chance to catch the wave or be drowned by it, to experience symbiosis or submersion. Right now, we are in this exact moment within the information age. The wave has crested. We are transitioning from phase 1 to phase 2. Many have already begun to utterly drown. They've lost control of their attention. They've entered a sort of consumer comatose. The thought of creating has long since faded, and the extinguishing of that desire to create has followed. The ease of information has become their walker rather than their wave. They grow increasingly dependent and immobilized by it, and this addiction subtly seeps into all available cracks in the day. The phone becomes as essential as toilet paper when using the restroom. Undirected glancing of email fills all the little 5-minute gaps of the day. Having no more energy at the end of the day, they desperately attempt to stop the bleeding by wrapping their mind in the numbing tourniquet of social media. But there is a way out of this cognitive quicksand. There's still a rare chance for us to catch this wave, and we can better understand how by studying the transition from phase 1 to phase 2 back in the industrial age. The industrial age lasted from roughly 1760 to 1914. Historians divided it by what they call the first and second industrial revolutions. The first industrial revolution was about the first 80 years, 1760 around there to 1840. It's during this time that new practices are introduced and early experimentation begins. The factory system is born. The production of textiles becomes mechanized. Kinks in the making of steel are being worked out. This all concluding with Henry Bessemer patenting his process in 1856, which we'll get to in a second. Everything falls into place in what analyst Vaclav Smil called the Age of Synergy. That is, the Second Industrial Revolution, spanning from 1870 to, again, World War I at 1914. It's here that we see the optimization, standardization, and large-scale implementation of industrial practices. There is one particular example in the US worth highlighting, and that is the interplay of steel, trains, and coal. With the Bessemer process firmly established, the door opened for the mass production of steel. Compared to iron rails, steel rails lasted more than 10 times as long and could support more weight. So you have stronger rails enabling larger loads to be transported across the country. And this all catalyzed the movement of materials, including coal, which then powered trains. This resulted in the laying of 75,000 miles of railway in the 1880s, which, according to the business historian Alfred Chandler, is the largest amount anywhere in world history. This, combined with the widespread use of the telegraph, created increasingly complex business dynamics. All these moving parts created a need for better coordination, and thus the new field of study, scientific management, was born. The vacuum was filled by a collection of important thinkers, some who worked together, some who experimented by themselves, unaware of others exploring parallel paths. To get a sense of the key thinkers and the rate of progression in thought, let's just run through some important dates and important thinkers. 1910, Henry Gantt famously creates the Gantt chart, still used today. 1911, Frederick Winslow Taylor publishes the iconic work, The Principles of Scientific Management. Shortly after, 1913, Henry Ford's moving assembly line begins operation. There's a debate of whether Taylor's work influenced Henry Ford or not, but that's a side conversation. More importantly, 1916, Henry Foyle publishes the real page-turner, General and Industrial Administration, in which he proposed a comprehensive theory of management comprised of 5 functions and 14 principles. At this point, some of us may have ethical concerns surfacing. Weren't working conditions inhumane during this time? It's a fair question. In his 2019 book, Behemoth, A History of the Factory and the Making of the Modern World, Joshua Freeman describes how workers became mere, quote, extensions of machinery at the mercy of its demands and pace. That pace, by the way, is what Cal Newport described as having this bizarre quality of being an unnatural combination of boredom and constant attentiveness, right? I mean, like the things moving on the belt, your job never changes. It's always to do the same movement, the same behavior. But if you let your focus slip at all, the whole assembly line gets clogged up and everyone's looking at you with not the most friendly pair of eyes. So we should distinguish something here, though. Our focus is not the particular solutions that the thinkers of scientific management proposed, but rather it's their recognition of the need for studying the coordination of work, given its new form. Newport cleverly flips the counter-argument on its head. That is, for those who are saying, hey, why are we looking at thinkers of scientific management? They created these solutions that were just inhumane and they approach work in this overly mechanical manner. He flips that argument on its head by pointing out that given the current conditions of modern knowledge work, us studying better workflows is not a digital return to the assembly line, but rather an escape from it. Cognitively, we're already trapped in poor working conditions akin to the Industrial Revolution. Cal Newport describes it as, quote, futilely trying to keep up with email messages that arrive faster and faster. The 4-minute factory scene in Charlie Chaplin's 1936 movie Modern Times currently has 65 million views on YouTube, and it's fun. You should, go check it out. If you do, you'll see the number one comment sums this whole tension up quite nicely, and it says, quote, unfortunately, that is the factory scene in Charlie Chaplin's movie. This happens to me every day at work, but only in my mind. Our lesson from the Second Industrial Revolution is that old workflows cannot survive new work environments. As Neil Postman famously put it in his 1998 speech, technological change is not additive, it is ecological. The invention and widespread use of new technology changes the playing field. It requires us to intentionally rethink how to define and organize our work so that it can remain aligned with our unchanging nature. How has this pattern repeated itself in the information age? How can we apply this historical lesson to our own times? We'll explore those questions next week.